Shapiro, Deputy Chairman at Sasfin Securities, joining us this evening to unpack those movements. Good evening, David. And so you are in the financial capital of the world, which is currently covered in smoke. What is the activity on today's market, albeit I think just over the opening of the markets there in the United States?
They're a lot better.
Yeah.
They're starting to move up again. I think, look, New York loves a crisis, and when everybody goes into panic now, wearing masks, handing out masks. But it was pretty eerie and pretty frightening. But as I look outside now, I can see the sky clearing. So hopefully by tomorrow we're out of the danger zone. But markets just missing that. There's a pickup again this morning I see in US markets, just moving towards what I think is going to be a better 6 months. And Rafiwa, that's being reflected in our market as well. I think there's a much better feel for what lies ahead in the next 6 months. Those pictures are frightening. I promise you couldn't see the sun yesterday. You just saw this little yellow dot above our buildings here.
Yeah.
And no penetration. It was quite cold, yeah.
Yeah, I could only imagine how frightening it must have been, David. But let's bring it back to the local market performance today. Some of the catalysts that were the big movers today, I saw the financial stocks benefiting quite a bit from the rand that's strengthened quite nicely against the US dollar.
I think that's because there's improving. First of all, the dollar's slightly weaker, admittedly, but I think also the current account number, manufacturing number, and also that perhaps we've seen the worst in the rand. You mentioned the political news or the getting together of the government together with business leaders to try and address issues. I think these are all positive moves. Where the buying is coming in is in cheap banks, cheap retailers, and some even cheap property stocks. So I think that local institutions, and I would attribute it to local institutions, are looking and perhaps saying, look, this is a bit too cheap to ignore. Let's take some. So you've seen Pick and Pay, Woolies, Spar, all these businesses starting to attract some kind of investment at these low levels. There's a lot of work to be done to recover lost ground, but still, if we can just keep this buying up, then you're going to see a much better market in the second 6 months.
Let's talk further about company news. We had trading statements coming out of Bidvest and MultiChoice today. Let's start with MultiChoice. So a huge profit warning from them, over 100% decline in earnings that is set to come in their financials. And they're really talking about the issues around decoder subsidies, the foreign exchange losses as well, a myriad of other challenges that they're warning investors about.
You can simplify. I mean, everything that they buy, other than local production, has a offshore cost to it, has a foreign cost. And where the rand has come down to its current levels, it's no wonder that they're feeling the pinch. I know the issues in Nigeria, which are a bit complicated to unravel, but I think their main issue is that they can't pass on the increased costs of content onto their subscribers. They issue packages, and I think everything. It's not only some of the shows. I mean, even whether you're watching football, whether you're watching international cricket, all of those have got some foreign costs. So it's not unusual, or to see the kind of pressure that they've been brought under. This is everything they bring in is in a foreign currency.
Yeah.
So it's a very tough place to be, yeah.
Yeah, one would have thought that the likes of Showmax, of video on demand, would have offset some of those losses, or is it just a saturated video on demand industry, and MultiChoice is kind of having to compete with the likes of Netflix and Prime and Disney Plus, and it's just no winning for them, I suppose,
That's
even
exactly
in that space.
It. Yeah. That's exactly it. You can bypass MultiChoice and go direct, and it is you've paid your subscription a year ago, or whatever it is, every month. So I think it does. They're in a very tough space. The only way they can get around it is to develop local content of a nature that people want to watch, and I think that applies to every country in which they operate. They're getting closer to Canal Plus, but I was a bit disappointed that the number was so badly down, admittedly, and the shares reflected that, slightly down.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it's discounted already.
No, absolutely. And then Bidvest, of course, they're doing, their trading statement indicating that despite the pressure points, wages, inflation, and all of the things that they're grappling with in the South African market in particular, they're still going strong and during the current economic climate.
Yeah, exactly that. They just said, listen, we did well 6 months ago, we continue to do well. And they're all in the right place. They're in the services industry, they're in freight, they're in tourism, they're in travel, and so on. I think a well-placed business, and it's reflected in the performance of the share price, which just is continually creeping up, give or take a little bit of volatility here and there. But I think they didn't put numbers in. The year end is June, but I think just judging from the report, it's more of the same, more of what we saw in the first 6 months.
And then finally, a little bit of a broader economic story, David. South Africa's current account deficit narrowed in the first quarter of the year. I mean, is this anything to be optimistic about? Because as one would understand it, we've imported less than we've exported. Or is it a little bit more complex than that?
No, it's exactly that. I think the forecasts were for quite a dramatic number, which the current account was significantly less, which means that we have to go into the market and buy less dollars, and when you have to buy less dollars, it means that you can hold on to your rand. So I think it is a rand improving movement, much better than we thought. The manufacturing numbers were also slightly better than we thought. I know there are rough times ahead. But hopefully we can address those as we go by, But for the meantime, let's celebrate the rand below 19 and markets on at least a positive trajectory for them, especially driven by local South African shares.
Yeah, just a quick one on that, David, as we end the conversation. What do you think is going to happen to one of the world's most volatile currencies in the medium term? Are we going to see a continued strengthening somewhat, or are we just going to keep doing nosedives and coming back and going back? What do you reckon?
Are you talking about the rand?
The rand, yes.
Yeah, that's. You want to lose your reputation, make a forecast on the rand. I over the short to medium term, the next 6 months, I think we're going to see an improvement. And that's because I think global conditions have seen the worst. What the forecast is in the long term, that's, we'll probably follow the same downward trajectory that we have been for the last 10, 20, 30 years, which is also very closely aligned to the inflation differential between us and the major nations. But for the meantime, I think we can see a reasonable improvement in the rand.
Thank you very much, David. And stay safe there in New York City. David Shapiro, Deputy Chairman at Sasfin Securities, wrapping up the market day that was. And that